right. Welcome to season 2 of Minor
Yeah.
Quibbles with the Trost Bros.
Yeah, man. Season two already.
I know.
I
Took
don't
a
know if I can
six
handle
month
this.
off season.
Yeah.
Here we are again.
Yeah. I don't know. Do we really have the material for a whole season two yet? Like, find out, I guess. We refined season one for so long that, I'm afraid we're going to fizzle out. It might be like two seasons and canceled. I don't know.
Well, as we discovered recently, we've got the entire, AFI 100 movies, 100
True.
years list to go through. So, like, no,
Yep.
no shortage there. I think
Sure.
that's a gold mine.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's probably a good thing to we just got to figure out a way to randomize it. You know what I mean? Like I like that we can choose, and I'm glad for this one we've chosen
Yeah,
our path here, but I think there is something fun to the mystery of like being, minorly forced into having to watch a certain thing,
I
Like
agree. I think
I'm
one
never
of
gonna
the
I'm never gonna choose the African queen, I don't think.
right.
But I'll watch it, if fate decides that for me.
We need a little like spinning wheel or wheel that we spin at the beginning of these, and that just lands on something, or
Yeah.
maybe it lands on something we do for the next time or something like that.
Yeah, well, that's actually a good idea. Maybe that's a good way for us to like close these episodes, is like what's coming up next, we find out, via some randomized thing. Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to workshop that.
Our massive audience will also be just,
Yeah.
on the edge of their seats. What are they gonna talk about next time, or what's it gonna be?
Yeah. I mean, it would be more excellent if we just had enough people who are actually watching this that they could just, literally just like leave the comment and then vote it. And then it's like, by their committee, it's like, no, we want to hear what you think about such and such, you
Okay.
know.
Yeah,
So
maybe we'll do that actually next time. The one and only person to leave a comment gets to basically choose the episode that we do, the topic of next episode.
perfect. Yeah, it's great.
Well, for this one, we're going to be talking about In the Heat of the Night. Um, and very excited about this. This was one of the maybe 30 or 40 on the AFI Top 100 that I had not seen. Neither of us had seen. And I think where I want to start is that despite being a drama and being dealing with very serious subjects, racism, murder, etc., it's actually a very funny movie in a lot of ways, and it leaves you with a kind of feel good feeling at the end.
Hmm.
I'm curious to know like what your impression of that observation is. That it's
Yeah, I
humor.
think you're right. I mean, here's something that I think some of the best movies do, and some filmmakers have really narrowed this down in almost every one of their projects. Like you got your Spielbergs or your Coens, who understand that like even though life is dramatic, you could have hilarious moments within all of that drama. No matter how sad you are or angry or whatever, it's like something. There's always levity, at some point. And I think the best of those kinds of movies understand that and don't just try to dampen it down and just make you feel bad the whole time. And this movie is smart that way. And you know, Sidney Poitier is he's just so good. He's just so good in this movie, and he does so much with just these little subtle expressions. Like you don't see him get too much past like a 6 in this movie in terms of like how animated he is. There's like one time really where he's like, "I'm gonna get him off the hill" or whatever.
Yes.
He's like, "I'm gonna nail this guy." Like he gets very animated there, but everything else is just these little indications here and there that are just sometimes they're very funny. Yeah, I agree with you.
Something about there was always a smoldering kind of presence that he brings to every scene. And
Totally.
you really just want to see more of him through the whole movie. And
100%.
exactly as you say, he's never overplaying anything, but in those moments when he's just kind of like observing with that piercing stare, and so much is happening in his eyes that you resonate with as a viewer. And a lot of the humor in the film comes through in that way too, where he's observing the way that he himself as a black man is being treated by these white racists in the southern town, and you can see him withholding all of the things that he might say or the reactions that he might have, and for
Yeah.
some reason that kind of like stoic but just like, burning resolve to just like be centered is somewhat humorous in a way. Like you can, I don't know why it's funny, but there's
Right.
something kind of
And
humorous about it.
it's like simultaneously uh even more funny now, but also extremely sad too at the same time, just because it's like, you know, we'll just have to address the an elephant in this Zoom is that, we're a couple of white guys who are going to be talking about racism because it's inevitable with this, and it's not something you and I experience. Like we don't have, we can be empathetic or sympathetic and do our best to understand, but we will never really understand what that means or how that feels. But we would like to think in 2022, we live in a more enlightened time where even looking back in a movie, what was this, 1968? I don't know. I'd have to like double check the year on this, but it's like we've come extremely far from that point. So it's like we can even recognize that from a point of view where it's like, I'm sure we both are in agreement that as far as racism is concerned, like we're so over the concept of thinking that you could possibly be better than literally anyone, that it would be nice if that wasn't even a conversation we have to have anymore. Like it'd be great if it was just solved and done with and nobody had to experience that ever again. Unfortunately, that's not true.
Yeah.
And looking back some 50 years plus at this situation where I don't know exactly the point I'm trying to make. It's just more that like I feel like we live in a time where we can look at the way he's reacting to a situation intelligently and kind of feel that at the same time. And
Yeah.
I wonder, the audience of that year, clearly the people that were making it and the audience they were making it for probably felt the same way about it.
Mhm.
But that there's a large swath of audience that's going to look at that and not quite either agree or pick up on it, or etc. It's like there's probably some cognitive dissonance there that doesn't quite understand the
Yes.
humor behind that.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean, but it's really hard to put words to. Some of the humor definitely does come from that. There's sort of like a shared, um, there's a shared savviness about racism, I guess, between the audience or certain parts of the audience and the filmmakers themselves, where it's kind of like that both I and the filmmakers and the people acting it all understand that racism is a thing. And sort of like by depicting racism in this way, you're kind of like, I'm on the same page with you. We get this. Like this is a situation that happens. And like to some degree, maybe that's where that feeling comes from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's again, it's so well presented by Sidney Poitier, because it's like, just by him standing in that room and being silent and just having a bit of a look about it, you kind of feel that he just wants to explode constantly and knows that he would be in the right about it, but
Yeah.
he's smart enough to know that that's a really bad idea based upon where he is and how
Yes.
he's being treated. And I guess what's interesting about this movie to me, just beyond that, is how different certain areas of the country are from one another, but how, regardless of those things, this movie's also kind of about sort of the hierarchy of systems too, as far as like who runs this town via money and who do they allow be the leaders of their police force, and how do those people treat or charge against people who commit certain crimes in certain ways. It's like
Yeah.
there are levels to the politics of that this movie is definitely addressing, in
Yeah.
addition to just the, we got a yokel town that, is just angry that a person exists like this, and doesn't want to give up the idea that they could be smarter than them or whatever because of, the way they were raised, etc. Which I think is what makes this movie just far and away beyond a lot of what you see now. I hate to like use a cliche turn of phrase, but like they just don't make them like they used to. And
Mhm.
this movie's a really good case of that, where it's a pretty simple story.
Yeah.
A lot of it is comes down to like misjudgment, I guess, or like knee-jerk reaction, but it's covering a lot of topics at the same time.
Uh-huh.
you know. So you've got, clearly the whole thing is like, who murdered the dude? And on top of that, you've got all the ideas of racism in this small town and perception or whatever. And then you move on to the politics of like money, etc. But it's like a huge portion of that is that Sidney wants the plantation owner to be the culprit, but he's not. It's
Yeah.
just a mistake, it's a mistake on his part.
Yeah.
So it's ultimately a pretty simple narrative, but it's got all this complexity like thrown on top of it. And you got to admire that you can do that in less than 2 hours and make it something that's also entertaining and funny at the same time. Like,
Yes.
it's quite a feat.
Well, there's an underlying sincerity and authenticity to the movie. It's simple, both in, I think, its overall structure, but also just its presentation. It's not a fancy movie. They filmed in some small town, and the locations are the locations, and it's just very grounded. It feels very grounded, very real world. That makes it just feel accessible. And I think like a lot of, if a film with the same socio-political intentions were made today, I think it would be extremely preachy and obnoxious and
Sure.
insincere seeming, just because they probably couldn't resist the urge to put some caricatures on the screen or have somebody sort of like explicitly lecturing people about this and that, instead of just sort of like allowing the progression of events to occur in like a naturalistic way.
Right.
And
Yeah, you'd have to wonder if this movie was made today,
yeah,
and it was cleaned up. I mean, a lot of, maybe what comes in charming about this movie is that like some shots are out of focus, and clearly they didn't have the technology to do some of the shots they were like had in their head, like
yeah,
that whole zoom out from the train at the very end. It's like they're doing some tricks to make it work, and it doesn't, but
yeah.
it's charming because they did the best they could with what they had at their hands then. It's like you have to wonder, if we made it now and it was slick and well cast and well acted or whatever, would it even reach the same level of effect that it could have? And I think this, like, if there's a point where like movies are important, it's like this is one of them,
Mhm.
where maybe somebody watching this could actually like resonate with the way they behave, or like recognize something negative in themselves, or
Mhm.
realize even further, like, I guess being able to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. It's like,
Mhm.
I would imagine in 1968, if this was playing, in theaters across America, if somebody just inadvertently went to go see it because it's all that was playing, is there a good chance that some of those people have literally never interacted with a Black person, period? Like, it's a non-zero chance that
Possible.
that is, and it's
I don't
like,
know, but yeah, I mean,
yeah, non-zero chance, I think. And I think that's, I dare I say, I feel like if this movie were made today, then it would mostly just be lambasted as being too woke or something. And
well,
it's
it's funny because this movie is woke, but in like in a way that I feel is not obnoxious. I think when a lot of people talk about woke or complain that a movie is woke, it's not actually because of the intention of talking about social issues and criticizing the way America is and so forth. I think it's often just about the presentation of it and the degree to which the purveyors of the film are both they're both preachy and pedantic, and they compromise the artistic integrity of the film in order to put over a political message on you. So it's like this is a digression, but like an example of like a movie that had like a woke concept in it was the Ridley Scott one about the Last Duel, right?
mm,
Like
I didn't see it. So.
that's a film that it's about medieval times and it's about this actual historical duel that happened. But there are just several moments where characters will say things that, like, the movie feels very, very realistic to a degree, but characters will suddenly just like say things that feel so contemporary. They're like
Mm,
such contemporary ways of saying things and seeing the world, and
yeah.
they'll inject these explicit messages of some, ideology into it. And that's what's obnoxious. Is like
Yeah.
you took like a great concept and you undermined it because you needed to get your preachy political message across. Whereas in the heat of the night, is like much more substantive, talking about racism, these issues, but it doesn't do it in like a preachy way. It's just like here's this reality. You've got flawed people. Here's how they resolve the situation.
Yeah,
I don't
I
think
guess because part of that is mostly, I think, that the narrative is the most important thing throughout. Like, again, I think I made this point earlier, is like everything else sits on top of that,
Mhm.
or it's like the most important thing. And I was surprised by this. I didn't realize it was like a murder mystery movie. I
Mm,
didn't really know anything about this, but the last thing I thought it was going to be was like a kind of small town whodunit in
mm.
a way. And that's ultimately what it is. Like, by the time,
Yeah,
like, you're trying to find the clues as he goes along and like solve it, and you got your ideas of who it might be, but
yeah,
um obviously it's not done in like a campy way where they expect you to solve it by the time it's over, but it's like that's what the movie is, and everything else is just a bonus to
mm,
it. I think is what makes it truly great, is that I guess, yeah, I haven't seen The Last Duel, but it's like when you have anachronisms like that where it feels too modern but it's in the past,
yeah,
then it just feels like you're being lectured, and nobody likes to be lectured,
yeah.
period. Like, everyone wants to feel like they know enough to like not have to have somebody just stand a foot above you and like tell you this is what it is.
Nobody likes to be lectured, but a lot of people like feeling like they are the lecturer and they're kind of like bringing the truth to people who need to hear it. But the reality
Yeah.
is like, it never sort of, as much as it might be warranted, it doesn't work. I guess at that point, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, because it inherently makes the other person feel small or dumb or little, it
Yeah,
just, it's from the baseline. It's like, you have to be told such thing. It's like you're a child, which is, it's fair. A lot of people act like children and need to be lectured, but it's like,
yeah.
you don't necessarily have to do
When
it.
it's done in a really ham-fisted way, where you just kind of want to roll your eyes at it. I don't know. It's happening to a lot of films, and I'm just like it. This felt like such a breath of fresh air to me because it's just really legitimately talking about a serious issue, but doing it in a way that's sort of like is just really compelling and charming, and you never feel this sort of like eye rolly sense like, oh, here they go. Here's the, character who's going to give me the moral lesson, or here's the
Yeah.
monologue where they're going to explain to me, why I need to vote Democrat or whatever it is, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and it's because even the most minor characters in this movie are given that third dimension.
yes,
Like nobody is strictly there to just be an archetype of something, where it's like, you know, I um I don't doubt that there are people in this world that behave a lot of times in that singular dimension of just being like a total loudmouth asshole racist who just can't help themselves but be a
right,
piece of shit day in and day out.
yeah,
But that doesn't mean that they don't have a third dimension to them that makes them at least a little bit more interesting, just even if it's from like a psychological point of view. And like the plantation owner guy, Endicott, is
yeah,
a pretty good example of that. He's a total sociopath.
yeah,
He like, um, why am I? Yeah, Tibbs comes in
yeah,
and he instantly calls him Mr. Tibbs and
yes,
gives him that like surface level respect. And
yes.
you're like, oh, wow, this is kind of like interesting. What's
He's
going
an
on?
enlightened guy, this guy.
Yeah,
He's not
exactly.
racist.
Yeah. And then, obviously that completely falls out the window. But it's like, what is that character on the screen for? Like 3 minutes?
Yeah,
It's like that guy could have just been an archetype plantation owner who's just a seething, I hate black people guy, but he wasn't. It's more interesting. And therefore, it just leaves you with more to contemplate, I guess, by the end of it.
yeah. The way that the way that sort of part of it I think is of the historical period it was made in. So I don't know to the degree to which this still exists today, but there's this. Um, my takeaway from that particular sequence is that racism often hides underneath like a fairly genteel exterior,
Mm,
right?
yeah,
Like the guy is all he's all yeah, like welcome. Oh, you like orchids? Let me show you. Let me show you. But
yeah,
just underneath that surface, once you do something to cross him or offend him, like his true self comes out. And
sure.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's the guise of respect that clearly isn't there. You know, it's like wants to make you feel as though you're on the same playing field, but as soon as the scale tips one way, then it's like, no, let me remind you
Mm,
how powerful I am versus you.
yes.
I thought at the moment I have to go back and look. In the moment, I thought I was being clever because probably the most well, that's not true. The most iconic thing in the movie is they call me Mr. Tibbs. And that's like the only thing I really knew about this movie. But I guess probably the most iconic thing beyond that is the moment where they slap each other
Yeah.
briefly. I didn't know that that happened, but I thought I caught the fact that Endicott uses his right hand,
Hmm.
and I thought that was supposed to be an indication because they were talking about, no, he's left-handed, he can't be the guy who did it.
Oh, interesting.
And I was like, oh, wait a second, he used his right hand. Like
Oh,
maybe
okay.
it's, yeah. I don't know if that's like
I,
intentional little detail to like throw you off the thing, or if it was, whatever. Anyway, I don't know why I'm bringing it up.
it could be, or, or the actor's just right-handed, and that's how they did it. But I'm sure that that's one of
Yeah,
the things that they, maybe if they whatever the continuity director or whoever does that kind of thing on films saw that, maybe they were like, no, no, I know you're a lefty, but you got to hit him with your right hand, otherwise this won't work. But
yeah,
funny though.
yeah. Or maybe, yeah, if they wanted to be subtle and have it going the other way, could have done it with his left hand.
Yeah.
Leading that it's not him.
A couple things I wanted to talk about as well, just as like the relationship between Tibbs and Gillespie is kind of like central to the whole thing. They're like evolving respect for each other, I guess, that kind of eventually becomes like maybe a grudging friendship,
Yeah.
where they there's the pretty touching scene at the end where Tibbs goes to Gillespie's. I got the character's name right there, didn't I? Gillespie.
Yeah.
The
Yeah. You talk
police
about the
chief.
chief. Yeah.
Yeah.
We just call him chief. Yeah.
He goes to his place, and they kind of are sitting and talking and having a male bonding moment. I just thought that was touching, and I thought the progression was done with a great deal of subtlety throughout the whole movie. I just really
Yeah.
appreciated that.
Yeah. I was thinking about that quite a bit throughout the movie because something I was really concerned for was that it was going to be like a total change of heart 180, because that's kind of what, it's like storytelling 101 is your characters must go through a significant change in their journey or whatever. And I was really worried that it was going to be um just corny, the way that and I'm glad that it wasn't, because if there's anything I feel like I've learned in the last couple of years during a very trying time for everybody is that like it's kind of a very slim chance that anyone changes a lot. You kind of like stay within the lane.
Mm-hmm.
You got your bumpers on, so it's like you don't really go too far outside of what you've been molded as. Like, sure, there's probably outliers who have like totally flipped it and like, I've learned my lesson. That was a
Yeah.
horrible way of being, whatever. But it's like the fact that the chief and Tibbs both semi meet in the middle
Mm-hmm.
about it, but still kind of recognize that they are who they are and they're products of their environment. It's like you don't get the sense that Tibbs is like, yeah, I'm going to come back here and have dinner with the chief.
I
It's like,
had the
no,
exact
it's like,
same thought that
he's like, you never coming back.
they did make a sequel to this. I found out. I to
Yeah, it's
my
called They Call Me Mr. Tibbs.
I'm based on that. I can't imagine it's very good, but
I think
I'm
there's
going to
two
just assume it's
exclamations.
just the one film. And my sense of that sort of parting shot when they sort of say goodbye to each other at the train was pretty much that, like, you know, we it was one of those, like, when they're looking at each other, it's just you have this feeling that they both acknowledge that they both have just undergone a significant experience that will always bind them together in their lives, right? And they can't really be friends. And Tibbs is never going to go back to that town. Like, he has no
Oh,
reason
no.
to. And so when they're saying goodbye, then they're saying goodbye for good. But it's kind of with this like mutual, very male like acknowledgement nod of
Yeah.
like, okay, like I see you, you see me. Um, we figured it out. We're good. Bye.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. It's like, maybe, yeah, I guess it's not even like all is forgiven even, you know what I mean? Like there's still,
yeah.
you can tell that there's still Like maybe if they had one, two drink too many with one another, like it would go south really quickly. But they've gotten at least to a baseline with one another,
Yeah.
and that's enough,
Yes.
for both of them. Just leave it at that.
One fascinating progression that I noticed throughout the film was the degree to which Tibbs was more open and expressive and effusive. He begins the film with a very stoic demeanor. It's again that just kind of like he's watching, he's observing, he's restraining himself from doing what he would have every right to do. But then it's only I don't know, it must be halfway through the movie or past it when he sort of actually smiles for the first time. And then he laughs multiple times toward the end of the film. The character laughs. And it's so, it really stood out to me those moments when he actually like sincerely laughed because he had been so just like, in I'm in hostile territory mode that to see the characters sort of like open up and be able to do that was a sort of a moment.
Yeah, and it kind of goes to the first thing we're talking about is in terms of levity in a movie, kind of having humor to it is, us getting in on the joke is different than seeing the characters experience some of that levity for themselves too, where it's like we might find some humor in a line or a look or something like that, but that doesn't mean that in that moment that character
Yes.
feels that way.
Yeah.
So it is nice and refreshing to see him say, "Oh, my dad used to say that to me, and that's funny to me." It gives you a sense of relief, and that's just good on the filmmakers for recognizing that. We were talking about this after we finished it. Is that there? It just feels like the Coen brothers probably love this movie.
Hmm.
Like immensely. And I just feel like you definitely see a lot of them in this, or a lot of their influence, I guess, coming from a movie like this for that very reason. Is like,
there is a certain parallel between it and like Blood Simple and some other
sure, yeah,
where it's a murder is what brings it all together, but there's a combination of the seriousness and the drama and the
mm-hmm.
drama, or rather there's a combination of comedy and drama, and like a lot of the comedy is humorous to us, the viewer,
Yeah,
but not to the person undergoing the situation necessarily.
yeah, yeah. I mean, what else can I say? I get why it's on the AFI 100 list, and I think it should stay there. Like, maybe this is controversial, but I feel like that list is due for an update because
Hmm.
I think some of the things that maybe exist on there exist out of being grandfathered in, perhaps.
Hmm.
I mean, I can't say that for sure.
Yeah.
Um, it's like, is Snow White and the Seven Dwarves one of the best 100 movies ever?
Hmm.
Or has it been superseded by another Disney movie that maybe is actually better than it? Like,
Yeah.
it's been a while since I've seen that, but it's like at the time that I don't know when was this list made and who was it made by?
Yeah. Well, I know that they updated. I mean, the list I grabbed from Wikipedia had like 140 some entries. So it's
Yeah.
clear that they do put new entries in, they push some down, they push others up as like new
Mm.
things are released. I think in the case of Snow White, I'm sure that better films have been made, better Disney animations have been made since it was initially made. Personally, I'm a big Aladdin fan, but you
Yeah.
know, I think like you have to find some place to credit the OG, right? And
Sure. Yeah. I mean, but that's what I'm saying. Like, they're grandfathered in based on
yeah,
the achievement of the time,
yeah.
where it's,
Well, maybe this is heresy, but I mean, I think that there are better films than Citizen Kane.
sure. I mean, but that's
But it's
again,
always going to be number one of that list because it's such a revolutionary piece of
right.
work. Every film since then owes something to it.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
It's, yeah. A movie that, because it birthed form,
Yes.
in that
Yes.
way, has to be given that respect, because it's like, otherwise there's no giant to stand on. So it's like, yeah, but, and I mean, that's a pretty deep conversation, because I guess it all comes down to like what makes something the best. It's like trying to judge gymnastics, like when I watch the Olympics, like I'm just gonna have to trust you that that vault was a 10.
Yeah.
It's like all of it looks awesome to me. Like, I'm not gonna question the judges, on something like that. And film is, it's not gonna be that different. We know a bad one, we know a stinker when we see
Yeah.
one, but
Yes. Yes. Well, to wrap it up, I think we usually end this with a verdict, and I think that's a good as way as any to end. I mean, my verdict is this is a great movie. It's an entertaining, fun watch that kind of just you feel great after watching it at the same time, even though it deals with very serious subjects. And it just yeah, recommended. I would say if you haven't seen this classic, then you gotta prioritize that.
yeah. Run, don't walk to your Roku. Like you
Mm. Cool.